I've been thinking about the Brian Griese thing a lot. It's very interesting to me. Why did Mike Shanahan recommend Brian Griese, of all people, to Kyle Shanahan? I mean, really, Brian Griese, former NFL quarterback. There's a lot of former NFL quarterbacks. What made Griese so special? What? Well, first of all, I'd like to think that Kyle Shanahan had a huge, like he interviewed a lot of people, a huge search and got to get the right person. But frankly, I doubt it. I don't know. I doubt they interviewed many people. John Lynch came out a week ago at the combine and said, look, I don't know how we're going to replace these coaches. Kyle isn't really a networker. So Brian Griese isn't in his network. He's in Mike Shanahan's network, his dad. And we know that Kyle gets a lot of his assistant coaches through his dad. So I could see Mike recommending Griese. Well, why? Who was Mike Shanahan's quarterback coach? Do you remember? When Mike Shanahan was the offensive coordinator with the 49ers, his quarterback coach was Gary Kubiak. Now, Gary Kubiak he played for the Broncos in the 80s. He was John Elway's backup quarterback for 9 seasons. That was back when Mike Shanahan was the offensive coordinator on the freaking Broncos back in the day. So he coached Kubiak, coached Elway. Kubiak had a personal connection to them. That's the theme with the Shanahans. So then Kubiak finally retires in 1991, immediately goes to Texas A&M, his alma mater, as a running backs coach. Is there for 2 seasons. Then Shanahan hires him as a quarterbacks coach in 94. So I'm sure Mike's being like, I mean, it worked once. Why not do it again? Right? This is how I did it. I don't know how you're going to do it, Kyle, but I created a quarterback coach. His name was Gary Kubiak, and he turned into an excellent offensive coordinator, excellent head coach. So let's just make the next one. Pretty much the thought process here, right? And Brian Griese was also a backup of John Elway, also played for Mike Shanahan, personal connection. I get it. So if you're trying to be positive about this move, be like, hey, man, maybe it worked for Gary Kubiak. My voice cracked on that one. It worked for Gary Kubiak. Why can't they do it again? I'm sure that's what they're thinking. And that's fine. I mean, I'm not arguing against that. Here's where I push back. Before they made this hire, I went on with Jesse Naylor on 49ers After Dark, and we both said that Kyle has a tendency. There's 2 kind of position coaches. The guys who are 100% committed to that position and aren't really looking to get promoted beyond that. Bobby Turner, Chris Kosterick. Those are the ones who are usually specialized in development. And you got the guys who are passing through. Guys who get promoted almost every year. You're a position coach for 1 year, then you're a coordinator. Then D'Amico's like that. Who else is like that? Rich Scangarello, right? Now he's his offensive coordinator for the 2nd time. Not really a quarterback coach, but a guy who's on the cusp of being a coordinator, a head coach, someone that Kyle Shanahan can take credit for in his tree. And Jesse and I both agreed before this hire that we would like the Niners to hire a true quarterback coach, not someone who's passing through, who really aspires to be a coordinator, a head coach, because this is a big project, Trey Lance. You need a Bobby Turner, Chris Kosterick level quarterback coach. I mean, you don't need it, but it would really help. Someone who's committed to being Trey Lance's quarterback coach for the long haul, not some guy who's going to be his quarterback coach for 1 year, then the offensive coordinator the next year, then a head coach somewhere else in 2 years. That's what we said. And it sounded right. I mean, we agreed on it. No one disagreed. But then the Niners went and did the opposite. They hired Griese, who to me is like Kubiak. Kubiak was Shanahan's quarterback coach for 1 year on the Niners. Coach Steve Young didn't have to develop him. He was already in his prime. Then he went with Shanahan to the Broncos. Became the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, was that from 95 to 2002. He coached Elway. No development needed. And then when Elway finally retired, who did he coach? Ding, 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 Brian Griese. There's the connection. He coached Brian Griese, who was not good. Never developed. Disappointment. Not a franchise starting quarterback. Then he became just an offensive coordinator. Then he went to Texans, the Houston Texans, and was a head coach. Really good coach. But it was clear Mike brought him onto the staff because he saw him as a up-and-coming talent as a coordinator and head coach. Great. My prediction is that Griese will be the Niners offensive coordinator in 2023. He won't call plays, but they're going to promote him. Start him at quarterback coach, but then he'll be an offensive coordinator. And look, he'll be a head coach. If Mike McDaniel can be a head coach, then Brian Griese can be a head coach. I mean, same with Anthony Lynn. Kyle is building an army of, people in his tree. It's great. But I still think with a quarterback like Trey Lance, better to just get a great quarterback coach. Someone, and I'm sure these guys exist, right? There are hundreds of quarterback coaches in college. A bunch in the NFL who might want to work with this Trey. He's one of the most gifted quarterbacks in the league right now. I mean, if you really cast a wide net, interview 20 people, I'd be hard pressed to think that Griese would be the most qualified to coach Lance. I mean, yeah, Griese played, but there's other guys who've actually, I look at the development I did with this guy, with this guy, with this guy. Here's how I would develop Lance, just like the Kosaric of quarterback coaches. But no, they brought in an up-and-coming coordinator, an up-and-coming head coach. Okay, fine. That's how the Shanahans do it. Let's see if it works out. I just want to remind you that when Kubiak got his start, he was coaching Steve Young. Not 22-year-old Steve Young, 30-year-old Steve Young, or 33. How old was Steve Young in 1994? How old was Steve Young in 1994? 33. He was coaching fully developed 33-year-old Steve Young. Then he went and coached even older John Elway. And basically what he was doing was learning Mike Shanahan's system, not developing a quarterback. He was learning Mike Shanahan's system while a veteran quarterback who needed no development was handling business. Great spot to bring in a former quarterback who has no experience coaching quarterbacks. It's a great place for a quarterback who doesn't need development. A vet, a Hall of Famer, not a 20. I mean, I don't know if Gary Kubiak would have been the right coach for Steve Young when Steve was 22. At that time, Steve needed Sid Gilman, Bill Walsh, Mike Holmgren. Bill Walsh never played quarterback, but he could develop him. Anyway, I think that's why Mike Shanahan did what he did.